For several years, we at InVia have been really interested in the rites of passage that accompany us in life. And over the past few years, we have become especially intrigued by the phase constituting eldership or sagehood, because we have quite a lot of community members who are now entering this phase. So we would like to have a conversation with our broader community about what it means to age positively in a society and a culture that places so much emphasis on youthfulness, immortality, and the pursuit of pleasure. We would like to have a conversation with older people about their perspectives on the meaning of life.
I'm in a space of transition. I'm noticing a tendency to move towards a more kind of mellow existence. Letting go is becoming an important theme for me. I think young people need older people to talk to. And so I think my faith has very much fueled a lot of my social concerns. I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist, and I tend to want to set the world right. We need to be very careful about the way we talk about God and the language that we use. I want to be more open to whatever comes to me. I want to embrace life as fully as I possibly can, to live my life with meaning.
Russell, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you.
You're a Jesuit priest and currently director of the Jesuit Institute South Africa.
That's correct.
What is a Jesuit priest?
So in the Catholic Church, we have a number of different orders of priests. So I like to explain it like a big umbrella, and then there's smaller umbrellas underneath. So there's this big umbrella called the Catholic Church. And then there are these smaller umbrellas where people in history have founded these religious orders responding to a specific need in a specific time.
Okay.
And so we Jesuits were founded by a man called Ignatius of Loyola, a Spanish guy, and this was around the year 1550 or so. And he founded us specifically in the aftermath of the Reformation to try and bring back some of the integrity to the Catholic Church. He was really worried about, for example, the education of the clergy. And so we are well known for our educational institutions all over the world. So that's really how it fits into the bigger picture. The order is called the Society of Jesus, and they call us Jesuits for short.
So that's your work.
That's my work.
Who is Russell the man?
So I think I'm somebody who is enthusiastic about life, is passionate about a number of different things. I like to engage with people. I seek deep conversations with people, meaningful ones. I'm also somebody who I think is not afraid at times, which gets me into trouble, to say what I think about certain issues. I'm somebody as well who I like to find out more. I like knowledge, and I like to observe the world as well. I studied sociology at one point in my life, so I like to observe people. I'm a people's person, an extrovert, and I can sometimes be quite overbearing for some people.
You're relatively young, not yet 50. Do you find that you are, even at this relatively young age, already preparing for growing older?
I think so. It's an interesting question, that, because when we first started to talk, in the last couple of years, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been thinking more and more about what the best way to explain it, Richard Rohr has said about the first half of life and the second half of life.
Yes.
And as 50 comes closer, and I know people say 50 is not that old, but you do start to think about your working life, and you start to wonder about, the time I've got left, what do I want to do? Life just seems to go by so quickly, and if I look at the first half of my life, it's gone by very quickly. And so I find myself looking more and more towards the second half of life, and also seeing how I think I'm in a space of transition and how things are changing for me. The first half of life, there's a lot of energy. You want to make sure everything is done as well as possible. And I guess the best way to explain it is I'm noticing a tendency to move towards a more kind of mellow existence. And wondering about a lot of the things that I really held on to and was tense about. Are they really worth it? Letting go is becoming an important theme for me.
I want to ask, do you have tools that help you discern what is important as you grow older?
I think so, very much. So, the tradition that I come from, discernment is a very important word, that we're always trying to work out what is God inviting me to do now at this point in my life. So first of all, to listen to what's going on inside of me. I think that's quite important. To listen to people around me and to the things that are happening. I think as well in prayer, to dialogue with God and to ask that question of God, what are you inviting me to at this moment in my life? And I think observing that and observing, the places in my life where I'm finding energy and happiness, a certain joy, vis-a-vis those places where, it feels like a drag and it's draining my energy and it's leaving me feeling hopeless. Those for me are important tools. So, for example, I used to do quite a lot of writing for a number of secular publications in South Africa, a commentary on politics in the church and commentary on the church itself. And about 2 years ago, I started to feel, well, is this really the place I want to be? I want to write, but this is not the kind of writing that's giving me that energy and that passion anymore. There's a different kind of writing that I want to do. And so slowly I've started to let go of that, and I have begun to explore other ways of writing. So those would be the tools that would be important for me.
You mentioned prayer now, and somewhere I read that you said about prayer that we should be flexible in our interaction with God. Would you like to give a short comment on that?
And I think that hits the nail on the head when I'm talking about the first half of my life and the second. So I was very much into method of prayer. This is the steps one has to do. And And in the last number of years, I'm finding, well, actually, that's just really a structure to help me. There's a letting go that's got to take place. And there's a flexibility in prayer. And because God speaks to us in many different ways. And I guess my personality tendency was always to make sure that I did everything according to the list that I had and so forth. I'm finding now, well, we don't have to do that. That it is possible for God to speak to me in many different ways. It's possible for me to speak to God in many different ways. And so to be flexible in that relationship means that maybe, I use a little bit of some of the methods I was taught, but also I explore new things. So for example, to go back to the writing, I've often wondered, is that writing, especially the kind of writing I want to do at the moment, almost a dialogue with God about certain things in my own life and things that I observe in the world around me.
This flexibility echoes what you said also in an article about Pope Francis, who in 2013 became the head of the Catholic Church. And shortly afterwards, you wrote in an article, and I'd like to quote, "He reveals a profound respect for people where they are, not where it's considered best for them to be. He says, it is not possible to interfere spiritually in the life of a person. We must always consider the person. Francis knows that most people live their lives in the grey, and he is not afraid to enter that grey and meet people there. He is not telling us what to see, but how to see. Through the lens of mercy." And from that article, it sounds that you are in accordance with him.
I think so, and I think that business of grey has been something that has been important for me. in the first half of my life, when I was studying and when I first went and began ministry, everything was very black and white. There was a right way and a wrong way, and nothing in between. And then you start to get involved in the lives of people, and you have to face some of your own stuff, and you realize, actually, not everything in my life is black and white. There's a lot of gray. And I more and more got the sense of a God who actually is more comfortable in the gray of our lives and of life generally than a God who is on the white side or the black side. And that we would, and I would find God much more in the grayness of life than what I do and this led me to thinking a lot about questions around perfection and imperfection. You know, we have a certain definition of perfection, and I think even in our societal life, we tend to think to be successful, you have to be perfect, and you have to do things in such a way. And if we're really honest with ourselves, if I'm honest with myself, I'm actually imperfect, and my life is imperfect. And most of these things that I put forward as perfection are really just facades, you know, because in a way I feel in the world that's what I have to do. And so this image of a God who lives in the imperfection, in the grey, but yet has this enormous mercy, for me just seems to feel so right because of my own experience and listening to the experience of other people.
After Desmond Tutu's death, you expressed a very similar sentiment about him than what you just said about the Pope. You said, like Pope Francis, he would rather look at the person in front of him than at the rules.
I think so, and I think, you know, certainly the tradition I come from, the Catholic Church, you know, we have a lot of rules and a lot of doctrines, and that maybe in one way we need that system to guide us. But when the rules become the end and we subjugate people to the rules and people suffer because of that, you know, I'm not comfortable in that space. That I think we need to look at the person in front of us. And I think Jesus did that in the scriptures. You know, I was just paging through the other day the Gospel of John, and there's so many people that Jesus meets in the Gospel where they are.
And always, or often the marginalized.
Exactly. You know, and it's you know, people who are struggling with faith, it's women, you know, and he comes to them, he meets them where they are, and then, you know, he offers them something. He doesn't say, oh, well, if you want to be with me, you come to my point of view first. And, you know, in organized and structured churches, we can sometimes do that. You know, these are the requirements that are needed for you to be a good Christian or a good member of this church. Oh no, sorry, you don't meet those requirements, so we'll leave you on the periphery. It seems to me that's completely the opposite way to which Jesus works.
You've met Pope Francis.
I have.
And I'd like to quote you something which he said in a recent documentary on Netflix called Stories of a Generation, and I'd like to have your comment. He says that, I think that today it is important for the future of mankind that young people talk to old people.
I think that's so important. And I think especially in the more Western, urban, secular setting, we're losing that. You know, I often say to younger people, you know, our elders are the wisdom of our times, right? That's where the wisdom lies. They have life experience to share. And many times, older people want to do that. But we're so busy chasing, work and busyness and this digital world that we live in. We can lose that, and we have to come to a point where we realize if we're going to be human beings, the wisdom is not going to be found in our many, chasing of this, that, the next thing, but rather in those who have been through life, have lived through stages of life, who've lived through disappointment, who've lived through suffering, and are sitting on the other end smiling and wanting to share what they have. So I think it's a great quote, and it worries me. One drives around and you see these big old age homes, and at one stage I was a chaplain to one of them, and some of the older people there would tell me they don't see their families for 3, 4, 5 months. They sort of sit there and they have each other, and it's so sad because many of them have got pictures of their grandchildren and their children in their rooms. And you can see there's a longing to be with them and to talk to them and to share with them. And we're fast losing that. And I think that's something we need to be really conscious and attentive to.
Russell, do you do youth ministry?
On and off. Okay. I used to. So in my job before working at the Jesuit Institute was I was working in a community, and I was actually chaplain to Wits and to University of Johannesburg, and also to 2 schools and an old age home. So I had the young people on one side and the older people on the other side. And once or twice we managed to bring the younger students, especially at Easter and Christmas, to the older people to give them gifts, to spend time with them. And for both sides, it always seemed they would come away saying, "Oh, thank you, that was wonderful. Can we do that again? Or would you bring them again?" So there was a human need there, So I did do a bit of youth ministry.
So do you think young people need specific advice, for example?
I think young people need older people to talk to. Young people, I think, today find themselves living in a world that is just so fast and so busy. And one of the things they don't have is time to reflect. And it seems to me that in conversations with older people, young people discover a place to reflect. I look even at my own life as a priest, and I live with 2 men who are over the age of 82, retired priests, and my interactions with them is very often just sitting, talking to them and listening to what they have to say. But I've come to realize how that becomes a place for reflection. Yeah. And very often I go to them and I say, I'm thinking of doing X, or this happened today. And they ask me a few questions, and suddenly I notice we're in a space of reflection. And they have the ability to do that. And sometimes they also have really good wisdom to share with me. Maybe next time, don't do it like that, but think about it like this. And I think, wow, if only I'd thought of that before I did whatever I did, or I interacted with whoever I interacted with. So I think, first of all, they provide that space for reflection, and secondly, a place of wisdom. And I think, thirdly, we have all sorts of wonderful ways of gaining knowledge, but human knowledge, meaning, those kinds of things we don't get off Google. Those are the things we get in conversation with older people.
And somewhere in one of your writings, you mentioned the phrase authentic connection. This now, I'm hearing a reference to that, and also us living in this digital world. And you say, I would say we are constantly connected, and you somewhere say we are relentlessly connected, but technologically, not deeply emotionally or psychologically.
Exactly. I sometimes wonder to myself, are we publishing our lives or broadcasting our lives or living our lives? Authentic connection, what does that mean? It's the ability, I think, to sit down and to share who I am with somebody else, and to also have them share with me. And how do we create these places of authentic connection? Now, a lot of older people have managed very well to adapt to the digital world, but they still have this ability to create that authentic connection, I think, quicker than what younger people do, because of their experience and because of their lives. And so it seems to me that in places where we can have conversations, dialogues with older people, we also learn something about authentic connection. It's happening, but we're also learning something about it. Because we relate to each other as human beings, not through some screen or other. I think in this aftermath of COVID, we've become, some people, we've had to connect on screens. And there are many advantages to that. And I think of even older people whose whose children have left this country and living in other countries, they're able to connect with them on screens. But it seems to me still there's something in the human DNA that needs a conversation like this. And older people, very often, is where you find that authentic connection. Because there's no competition. They've lived their lives. They're in a place, of the space to look back. Young people often, I think, middle-aged people maybe even, struggle with authentic connection because very often, I have to put the right foot forward. I have to make sure that they get the image of me that I want. I think older people let go of that, and that's not important, but connecting is.
We hope you enjoyed episode 1. Should you wish to further reflect on this interview, you can download notes from our website www.invia.org.za. Episode 2 is also now available on YouTube.